I don't know whether you've heard, but I'm offering some spaces in my calendar for Supercharge Your Fertility Discovery calls. So this call is for you if you're ready to get pregnant naturally or improve your chances at the fertility clinic. We take a functional approach to fertility. It's the future of conventional medicine. There is a reason that so many medical professionals work with us. The approach is rooted in science. The call is for both you and your partner, and all you do is go to FabFertile, FabFertile.com and click on book a free call. Then you'll be booked in and ready to spend the 30 of the most valuable minutes on your fertility ever.
Or times that we've overcome in the past or things that we've been through. And I think it's okay for us to acknowledge them and to acknowledge that we're different and we're stronger and we have a new set of skills, and then to celebrate that we're at a different place, a crossroad, and move on. So really kind of putting a stake in the ground and then making that conscious choice towards a life we want.
Welcome to Get Pregnant Naturally, where functional medicine and natural fertility solutions will help you get pregnant and have your baby.
Hey everyone, I'm Sarah Clark, and my mission is to inspire, motivate, and empower you. And most of all, I want you to wake up. So with functional medicine, we can discover what causes infertility and eventually reverse the condition. Today, I'm welcoming Kathleen DiChiara to the podcast, and we're digging into our food supply and the impact on fertility. As a nutrition educator and researcher, Kathleen has dedicated her work to increasing the public's knowledge about the connection between nutrition and the patterns of disease. Her practices aim to address the health of the whole by taking into account the physiology and biochemistry of the human body and our connection to our nature. Kathleen is a functional nutrition practitioner, BioIndividual Nutrition Practitioner, certified integrative health and nutrition coach, and author of the bestselling book, The Hidden Connection, and will publish her next book, Resilience, with Hay House in early 2020. Her incredible story of recovery and hope is featured in the documentary Secret Ingredients. Kathleen is the president and founder of Rhode to Health, Inc., a corporation dedicated to teaching and empowering others to embrace the self-care model to dig us out of the healthcare crisis. She is the founder of a grassroots organization called Nourished to Learn that bridges the gap between the foundation of nutrition and academic performance by teaching children, parents, and administrators the importance of nutrition in public schools. She also serves as a board member on the Rhode Island Department of Health's Board of Chiropractic Examiners, as well as the nutrition advisor of the board of the Bionutrient Food Association. Check out her website at Kathleen DiChiara. That's Kathleen, KathleenDiChiara.com. And before we jump into today's show, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on iTunes or wherever you're listening to this to make sure you never miss an episode. Hey, Kathleen, welcome to the podcast. Excited to have you here.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, awesome. So if you could share your journey with us and how you came to do this work.
Great. Yeah, I'll give you the short version. So I fell into the field of nutrition really in an effort to save my own life. I had worked in investor relations for a Fortune 500, and my husband and I were both very healthy. I did recreational triathlons. We had 2 little boys at home, and I actually developed sudden onset neuropathy in my left leg. So I did 6 months of physical therapy and other types of I would say alternative therapies, but in an effort to regain the use of my leg. And I did some injections, steroid injections and things like that. And it progressed and got worse. So I was starting to lose the function of my foot. And it was recommended that I have back surgery. So I underwent an L4, L5 laminectomy discectomy, which is just removing part of the bone in the lower lumbar to basically relieve the entrapped nerve, which was causing the neuropathy in the leg. And I actually ended up having a poor response to surgery. I had developed postoperative paralysis, and then that led to a myriad of chronic and autoimmune diseases following that, and that left me disabled at the age of 35.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was sort of a very, I would say, traumatic, response to what is often a very standard procedure. So it wasn't anything that was done wrong. It was just my body didn't respond well to it. And then because my immune system was highly agitated, I would say, I ended up developing a very long list of chronic diseases following that trauma. So, I really had great doctors and great teams, and I was very devoted to getting well and getting better. But the conventional medical care model was pharmaceuticals, opiates, a lot of pain medication, physical therapy, body braces, casts, crutches. It was sort of disease management or symptom management. And I was very frustrated, and I was very nervous about being on pain medication for so long and a lot of the interventions. So out of my own desperate attempt to kind of help myself, I turned to the study of nutrition. I don't know why I was drawn to nutrition. I felt like it was something that I could do for myself. It's something I felt I could have access to in my own home. And I was shocked at the amount of scientific literature that was available on the healing compounds in food. And that's where I discovered the connection to the microbiome and its capacity to help us heal. So I was very enlightened by just how powerful food could be. And I mean, like specifically, I was looking at what are the compounds in food that could help with reducing inflammation? Could I turn off a lot of the pain messages in the body? Were there things that I was bringing into my body that was creating systemic inflammation, that was exacerbating the chronic pain that I had system-wide? So those are the things that I was interested in finding out. And that was kind of the path that I went. And to my surprise, I was successful in accomplishing that. And that was really the doorway into the field of functional nutrition, which is what I practice today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's and your story with yourself and your family is shared in Secret Ingredients, which that movie is. Every time I saw the trailer, I'd start crying. So share your story, and I'm like, oh. And then the movie itself is just it is just so well done. I loved it. So I'll definitely highly recommend the movie Secret Ingredients. I think Kathleen will probably share a little bit as we go through the chat today a little bit more about that. But definitely check that out. Yeah, and so as far as the research, as the link between our food supply and chronic health conditions, even conditions such as infertility, what is the link there? Because I think a lot of times when people are struggling with infertility, the last thing they look at is their diet, whereas in functional medicine is the first.
Right, that's a good point. And it's surprising to me too, because here I am in studying and practicing functional nutrition, but I actually wasn't really drawn to functional medicine. I was very drawn to the mechanisms by which I had control over. So sort of those low-hanging fruit, the things that we do every day. I always say, we have the most influence on the things that we're doing every day, which is eating, sleeping, moving our body. And these are the things that really move the needle the most. But you're right, they're really the area where people have the most resistance, or they sort of turn to last. And I don't know if it's because I was so really drawn or mesmerized by the research that I was reading and some of the capacity for what Mother Nature provides to us, but also that chronic disease is largely linked to these very lifestyle things. So we know 6 out of 10 Americans suffer from at least one chronic disease, which is really 60% of the U.S. population. But even the World Health Organization talks about chronic disease being the leading cause of death. And when we look at chronic disease, including things like infertility, heart disease, lung cancer, whatever the ailments are, we know that the two main things, or two of the major things, aside from behavioral factors like smoking or excess alcohol or an occupational hazard, are chronic disease, chronic disease really being linked to our food supply, and then environmental exposure. So it's like we have that chronic disease component, but the thing that's really driving it are these environmental factors, right? The food that's coming into the body, and then our exposure to things. So when we make that connection and we look at our food supply as being a major contributor, then we have to really ask ourselves, what are the things that we can do? We can certainly improve the quality of our food. And that was kind of that light bulb moment. But I often find too, people are doing a lot of things like eating really good food or eating, maybe a specialized diet and trying to get in superfoods and nutrients, and they might even be supplementing. But oftentimes what they're not recognizing is that there are certain things within the diet that are actually impeding or influencing their body's ability to take advantage of a good diet. And that's what was happening for us. So we were trying to eat healthy, but there was something that was really getting in the way of us from reaching optimal health. And for us, it was the glyphosate that was still in a lot of the foods that we were eating in low chronic amount, like a low exposure. And that was really influencing our body's ability to absorb nutrients, simple things like minerals. And these don't seem like they'd be a huge element, but they're really like studies now have proven things like zinc, copper, and magnesium having deficiencies in just those essential minerals create abnormal enzyme function within the body. So we really have to start making the connection that these minerals need to just be a Goldilocks amount, right? You don't want too many and you don't want too much. So it's not about supplementing with them or pouring them into the body, because then you can create too much and an imbalance in the body. But you want to look at what are the things that would remove them from the body. So if you're eating foods and vegetables that have these minerals, is there something that's essentially taking them out of the body? And glyphosate was one of those things that was doing it for us, because it was chelating or binding to those minerals and taking them out. So I would say when people think about chronic disease or infertility, they have to really look at the quality of the food coming in, but then are there foods that they're bringing into the body that are carrying in an environmental toxin that's actually doing some destruction and creating an imbalance in the body? So I would say that's a huge, huge element in our food supply that's largely overlooked.
And I had Zen Honeycutt come on the podcast, episode number 17. So talked a lot. So from Moms Across America, and I think she was she part of the
Yeah, sure she was. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I saw her touring with you guys when you were doing some of the promotion for it. And so she shared a lot about that. So definitely check out episode 17. And so as far as glyphosate, if people aren't familiar with it, can you just kind of give a little synopsis of that, of where it can be and why it's so dangerous?
Sure. It's an active ingredient found in Roundup, but the thing for people to remember is that a lot of times people will recognize it as being used in genetically modified foods. So what I would call the forbidden four, which is corn, sugar, soy, and canola. Those are the large crops that are modified and then sprayed with glyphosate, pesticides, so herbicide or chemicals that have glyphosate in them. But then we also have other foods that are not genetically modified, but are sprayed with glyphosate as a drying agent, or what we would call a desiccant. And some of those foods are things like wheat, almonds, some of the beans, like the pulses, lentils and things like that. And then we have other foods like zucchini, papaya, alfalfa, potatoes, apples. These are things that are potentially foods that are certain species or certain breeds of them are being genetically modified. So I think it's important for people to recognize that right now we use the organic label as a way to identify foods that are not being treated with glyphosate, but also recognizing that we have to really connect with your farmers. You have to know where your food is being sourced from, and then you have to know what these large crops are. The biggest thing is that you're going to find it in processed food, because these are really the crops that you'll find in processed food. So that's when you're going to be looking for the label. Then, of course, when you're buying produce, you can choose organic produce and know that it's safe. But essentially, glyphosate is a registered antibiotic, and it's a registered chelator. So chelator, which is what I already referred to, which is binding to minerals and removing them from the body. And then also, it's a low-grade antibiotic. So it's like bringing an antibiotic, which is very destructive, to the microbes that are in the digestive tract. And so a lot of times people don't recognize that that's an area of vulnerability as well.
And you're really looking for those two stickers or the two labels. So is it Is it Project Verified? What is the one? A USDA organic and then Project Verified? Are those the ones?
That's right. Yep. So the way that the organic means that it can't be sprayed with glyphosate and that it is not genetically modified. But the reason why it's the gold standard is to find something that is organic and non-GMO certified is that the non-GMO certified products have to be tested for any residual amounts of glyphosate that might be in the soil or have been moved by the air. So when something has both of those labels, then you can be assured that it doesn't have glyphosate in the product. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's kind of a best standard. So the nice thing a lot of times is people will recognize brands. They'll find brands that they support, companies that they know have best practices. And that's usually a better way than to try to isolate individual products. So it's to find brands that you trust and you know what their practices are, and you've sort of done your homework, and then, sort of be loyal to them, as opposed to trying to, every time you go to the supermarket, trying to read individual labels. That can be a little bit daunting.
Mm-hmm,
so to simplify the process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So then a lot of people that come to see us obviously typically they've been through some sort of fertility treatment, be it an IUI or an IVF, and then they're coming to functional medicine, functional nutrition kind of as this last resort, kind of thinking, okay, I'll look at things naturally. And then when we start to make these changes, a lot of times they'll talk to their doctor, and unless their doctor is trained in functional medicine, they may not know the connection of how important this is. So it may feel they're not on the right track. So what's your take on this when a doctor says that diet has nothing to do with chronic disease, illness?
Yeah. I was told that very same thing. My husband was told that very same thing for a benign breast tumor. And in both instances, we proved, actually in our family, we removed 21 diseases just changing our diet alone. Mm-hmm. So the reality is that, I would just discourage anyone from accepting nutrition advice from a medical doctor, not to be disrespectful to that profession or that field, but nutrition is a field in and of itself. And medical doctors don't study nutrition in medical school, so it's uncommon for them, or it's not uncommon, I should say, for them to miss the opportunity to see the connection. So I just think in terms of the consumer, we as a consumer, just like I wouldn't set a broken bone, I would say if you want to understand the role of nutrition, it's important to ask somebody who's trained and studying nutrition. And the best way to do that is to sort of build a wellness team, have your medical doctor be an important part of that team, but then have somebody that you trust that you can rely on for nutrition information and other information, and think of yourself more collaboratively, as a collaborative approach, because you are your own healer. And so it's up to you to investigate what it is that makes the body healthy and what it is that makes the body thrive. And if you're relying on somebody else to sort of answer that question for you, then you're outsourcing, the most important part of your life. And I would just say to anybody that feels they need to, sort of validate that, by asking somebody else, or even accepting that as the answer. Let's just all pause for a moment and think, does that even make sense, right? That nutrition doesn't have anything to do with chronic disease. I mean, nutrition is the building blocks of the body. So it's very, very important that we not accept that as an answer, and we do our own investigation and then make that decision for ourselves.
Yeah. And I like that healing roundtable. I think it's from Dr. Oz, and I talk about this a lot, where it's, you have your RE, your OBGYN, your fertility coach, your nutritionist, your masseuse, your chiro, your acupuncturist, all your team is there. And really you're in the center. So you're the connector of your healing. And a lot of times for infertility, we go straight to the RE and we forget about the whole entire piece. And we also forget about ourselves as to, I think Dr. Mark Hyman says your body will whisper until we ignore the signals, and it starts shouting at us in the form of disease. And we've completely even ignored what our body's trying to tell us.
Right. And I also think too that, people have gotten used to, dissecting the body into individual parts. They have the dermatologist, they have the OBGYN, they have different specialties that they've gone to, or if they become sick, they go to different specialties. And to the point that you're making about having a wellness team, a lot of times people will say, well, I simply can't afford that. I can't afford to have all of these practitioners. I can't afford to have, people that are in each of these areas. But these are not people that you're seeing all the time. This is really, I would say, more of a relationship. Mm-hmm. So having a chiropractor that you trust, that you can go to when it's necessary, or an acupuncturist that's there. So these are people that are in your toolbox, so that when that moment comes, you really have built a relationship and you need them. So they're not somebody that you're going to all the time, but they're in essence keeping you healthy and keeping you out of that sick state, right? And so you have to think about it a little bit differently, but it's not something that you're not utilizing those services all the time, so it shouldn't be a financial burden as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And really, for myself, I don't know, I've been so busy in the last little while, and I've been helping others, and probably the same for you, where I ended up, I'm not sure if this happened to you, but I ended up neglecting my own health.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh my goodness, I haven't had the flu. I don't know how it's been, like, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. And I went down like for 3 weeks and just fell apart. And I'm like, oh, it's because I've been, doing all this extra stuff and not taking care of myself, not practicing the self-care, not saying no, doing all these things. And I saw Dr. Ben Lynch, who's the author of Dirty Genes, and he was on his Instagram there saying, I'm sick and it's my fault. And he talked about, I went to this conference and, I didn't get enough sleep. I said yes to this. I did all this stuff and now I have this. And, I could have avoided it if I had have done X, Y, and Z. So it's kind of neat to be able to see that you are, you can take control of your own health.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I agree.
Yeah. And so as far as optimizing our digestion and the impact on hormone balance, why is that important? And I think this is the last place people potentially will look when there is a hormone imbalance.
Oh, definitely. And I would say it's actually huge. I think probably the biggest thing, or the thing that we work on the most in my private practice, is digestion, because to me, it's everything. I mean, a lot of people hear about gut health and the microbiome and feeding the microbiome, but most often the problem is actually originating further up in the process.
Mm-hmm.
So digestion really being, one of digestive problems really are the leading to some of the major hormone disrupting issues that we see. So the top ones being lack of nutrient absorption, an imbalance of gut bacteria that's responsible for metabolizing estrogen, elevated cortisol levels, which lead to inflammation in the gut, and then compromised serotonin production, which is also the precursor to melatonin. So just to kind of break those down a little bit further, when we have digestive issues and then we don't have nutrient absorption, which happens in the small intestine, we end up really depriving a lot of our hormone producing glands from certain nutrients like B12 and selenium are needed to convert inactive T4 to active T3. So there's more to it, right? If we don't have enough good stomach acid and we're not flushing, bacteria and fungus through the small intestine, we can end up with small intestinal bacteria overgrowth there, and we can end up with all of these other chronic problems that we end up treating. But really, the issue is that we're having poor digestive function, and that actually has to get addressed first. So that nutrient absorption is so key, because you can take in all the healthiest food and supplements in the world, but if you're not absorbing them and you have damage in that small intestine, then it's a lost cause. It's really difficult to address that. So it's very important that be addressed first. The second one I talked about was bacteria imbalance, and that's really the microbiome. So that's a very large topic. I know you've probably had on other experts to talk about the microbiome. That's an area of expertise in our clinical practice. But we really, we do microbiome testing, and we spend a lot of time helping people to rebuild a healthy microbiome, but mostly because there's a lot of metabolizing of estrogen through the gut microbiome. So it's called estrobolome, and that's bacteria that modulate the circulating estrogen. So we look at things like beta-glucuronidase when we do stool testing, and we do DNA and RNA stool testing. And it's important for us to look at that activity so that we can see if estrogen is being reabsorbed or cleared through the stool. And if people don't understand, why they have high estrogen or why their estrogen is not being cleared, the gut microbes can really play an important part of that mystery, right? So it's like looking at the microbiome as our allies and helping us to understand, do we have enough of the microbes there that can help us break down our hormones? The third one is elevated cortisol, which is really difficulty with digestive function is a form of stress on the body. So if the body is having difficulty digesting food and it's inflamed, then you will have elevated cortisol, because that's like chronic stress on the body. And when you have chronically elevated levels of cortisol, you have a cascading negative effect on your hormones, your adrenal glands, and your overall health. So it's sort of this vicious cycle of elevated cortisol, which is that fat storing hormone around the midsection, and poor digestion. And they just go hand in hand. And so that, vicious loop of not being able to feel well and not be able to, heal the gut when you have that constant inflammation. And then the fourth one I mentioned, which is serotonin, which is produced largely in the gut and is that precursor for melatonin. So now that leads to poor sleep issues and mood imbalances. And so people who are not sleeping well are not detoxifying well. And then they're having mood imbalances and sugar cravings during the day because they have insulin resistance and imbalance due to poor sleep habits. So again, you're kind of in that loop. So you can see where the digestion is so fundamental. If you don't get that right, then you end up troubleshooting all of the downstream effects to what poor digestion is actually causing. So if we can correct that first, make sure that the body's engine is running smooth, then usually we can stop. We don't have to manage the other things, right? We can work on restoring the health of the microbiome, rebuilding diversity and the quality of the microbes, and then troubleshoot after that. But if you're kind of going at it the other way and looking at all the symptoms, then really it's like a game of whack-a-mole. You're just putting out fires, but it's just, you have to still address the foundation of health, which is digestive function.
So are you starting with testing, or how would you start with someone that came in with us?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually don't start with testing because generally everyone that comes to me is chronically ill. And then I would be just testing dysfunction.
Mm-hmm.
So my preference is actually to make corrections that based on we do a very deep health history. Mm-hmm. And then I make corrections based on general observations, usually symptoms and what their current diet is, and then what their health goals are. And then if we resolve what the issue is, then there's no need to do additional testing, although that's always an option if somebody wants it. And if we make improvements, but there's still something that needs to be addressed, then that can determine what test I would like to do. Right. So there's different testing for different reasons, and some of them are better than others. Mm-hmm. And some of us give us different markers. So the nice thing about making some improvement, like over a couple of weeks, and then doing a test, is that we can be more specific about what test would be more effective, whether it's a hormone panel, a stool panel, or which stool panel, or do we want to look at an oats test and look at metabolites? So it can give us a clearer picture, as opposed to somebody coming with so many symptoms, and then in essence, we'd want to do lots of testing, and that just is not necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. And so if someone's made a lot of diet, so a lot of people that come to us have already made the gluten-free, dairy-free, they've switched to, non-GMO, they've gone organic, and then they're still not pregnant. So why is focusing on the health of the microbiome, like we talked about here, so important?
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest mistakes that I see universally is that people change to a gluten-free, dairy-free diet, or move over to, non-GMO, and they forget to replace the fiber that they've just removed. So when we go to a gluten-free diet, we're essentially cutting out about 75% of the fiber that we were once eating, which is really food for our microbes. And so that's the biggest thing. So people have sort of shifted over to a processed food, gluten-free, dairy-free, non-GMO organic diet. It's really common. Everyone's done it, including myself.
Same here.
Yeah, raise your hand. And I would also say too, it's a slippery slope. Like you can be doing great and then go back there. Mm-hmm. When my kids say that there's no food at our house, there's only ingredients, then I know I'm back at the place I'm supposed to be. But I think, when you have young children, it can be really hard, or when you're traveling or when life gets busy, it can be life-saving to have processed, organic food available that you can, so I think it's just that balance of not being a slave to the kitchen, and then finding where that sweet spot is. And I would say for us, it's definitely simplifying. So when the quality of the food goes up, we tend to eat less. So we have, I would say we're not craving, we're not snacking, as much. And then another trick, which my kids are not fond of at all, and I'll just even say this, because some of your audience is obviously even listening because they're trying to start a family. So maybe it's a spouse that they're competing with, but is that when you do bring in, organic or gluten-free and dairy-free or non-organic snacks, that those things go first. We actually put them in a little chest and we lock it. And it's like in the dining room. And that is kind of our stash for school lunches and when we're on the go or when we have to travel somewhere. Or if I just were to put it in the cupboard, it would be gone, annihilated in a day.
That's what happens. 24
Even
hours.
us.
Yeah.
That's right. In and out.
Everyone's like, "Ooh, look at this stuff."
That's right. And even for us too, like I would have the tendency to go for the crackers or to go, so it's a temptation. It's a universal temptation. So I think just tucking it away out of sight and putting it in a different spot is not that you can't have it, but it allows you to kind of moderate how often you have it and what are the reasons why you're going for it. What are the times that you want to, make it, it's that great go-to. It's there when you need it, right? So it's like, okay, we're going to be traveling or we're going to be going here, or it's a school day, or the kids have a party to go to, or I have a trip, so I need to go and take some things with me. And so now I have stuff, I'm not in that place. And then when you're home, eating whole foods, like putting bowls of clementines out and having lots of, fresh fruit available and berries and, making things easy that way. I think we make a lot of soups. So we have leftover stews and soups, and those are the things that can be very satiating. And I would just say that, you get good at how to kind of transition yourself away from, diverting to that low fiber, starchy, gluten-free, organic, diet, is to just really, really pay attention to those patterns and that behavior. Because if the microbes don't have anything to eat, if they're just eating a lot of that processed healthy, quote unquote, healthy food, then they're not producing short chain fatty acids, which is lubricating to the mucosal lining. And that's the reparative process. And you're not going to get the diversity. So you can be taking all the probiotics in the world, but if your microbes don't have anything to actually eat, like fiber and healthy foods, whole, home cooked foods or prepared foods, then there's nothing for them to actually eat. And that's what's creating the diversification of the microbes. So being able to expand the diet by expand your microbes really by expanding the diet. So I would say that's the big thing, the switching to the organic diet. And then the more you can diversify the microbes, the less food intolerances you'll have, because that's the other big mistake people make, is they stay on a highly restrictive diet for a long period of time. And that's actually not a good idea either. So you don't really want to be on a diet that's long-term restrictive, because the more restrictions you have, the less microbes you have. So the idea really is to transition, to take foods that are inflammatory out of the diet and then diversify the microbiome so that you can tolerate as many foods as possible, and then expand the diet, bring those foods back in, maybe you in a good quality, in an organic form that you maybe before were sensitive to.
What's your take on gluten, bringing that back in?
Well, it depends on the individual. And some people can tolerate it in small amounts and a good quality in organic gluten, and some people can't. Usually if there's an autoimmune disease has been triggered, or certain types of, certainly if there's any celiac, if they have a celiac gene, then those would be instances where that would not be a good idea. Mm-hmm. So we do that on a case-by-case basis. We really look at the individual. We can do antibody testing and that indicates whether or not somebody would be a good candidate. And then we couple that with their health history, whether or not they've had previous sensitivities. And then, of course, the caveat there is that people have to understand that when they switch, if they were to reincorporate gluten back in their diet, it shouldn't be a replacement for vegetables and whole foods and high quality proteins and fats. And that's usually what ends up happening, is people kind of, once you start going back to the breads, pastas, and crackers, then that's filling the space of something else that should be there. So you have to recognize it, that if you're bringing it back in, it's really in a small amount as a way to, add to the diet, but not as a replacement, for something that would be more nutrient dense, I would say.
Are you struggling to have your baby? First of all, know that my heart goes out to you. I struggled with infertility just like you. So I want you to answer a question for me. Do you want to improve your chances of having a healthy baby? So if the answer is yes, then I'd love to help you. And I'd like to help you do it for free. So go to FabFertile, FabFertile.com and click on book a free call. So here's how it works. Right at this very second, you're probably stuck on one of these three things. So first of all, you're dealing with stress and constant worry. You're up late at night, scouring the internet for answers, leaving feeling even more worried and overwhelmed. Sometimes you find yourself worrying all day long, day after day, and the underlying fear is that you'll never be a mother. Number two, you're trying to eat healthy, stick to an exercise plan, take all the right supplements, get a great sleep, but life just keeps getting in the way. You have good intentions every week, but then you get busy and tired. And the last thing you want to do is focus on your health. You worry that you'll never stay on track. And number three, you're preparing for your next transfer. The IUI or IVF is coming up so fast. You can feel yourself overanalyzing everything. You know you shouldn't be stressed, but thinking about being less stressed just stresses you out even more. You don't know which diet, supplements, or exercise routine will optimize your chances. You're confused and worried that this is your last chance to be a mother. So which of those sounds most like you? The good news is that whichever it is, I can help you craft a plan to enhance your chances of conception for free. I'd love to spend some time with you. So here's what to do next. Just head on over to FabFertile, FabFertile.com and apply. So it's a really short application that just tells me about your health, how long you've been trying to conceive, and how soon you'd like to be pregnant. Then you'll be all booked in and ready to spend the 30 most valuable minutes on your fertility ever. So go to FabFertile, FabFertile.com and click on book a free call. And so as far as some of these foods that you'd recommend for the microbiome, are there any ones particularly, or is it just more you're looking at sort of making sure the whole foods?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of, leeks, pomegranates, potatoes, especially when you cook potatoes and then chill them, they form a resistant starch that feeds the microbes. So leftover potatoes are really great. Different types of grains, if people are going to incorporate grains, if that's something that their body does well on, then, small amounts of high quality grains like wild rices would be a good choice. And then things like jicama and radishes, different fruits, all the leafy greens, fibers, anything that the body really has to work hard to break down. So yeah, I think diversity is key. Polyphenols is really powerful. So all of the colorful foods, those are very rich in diversifying the microbiome. And believe it or not, exercise, actually, so a non-food item, is really powerful for diversifying the microbiome. So I'm always encouraging people to not just look at what's on their plate, but to also look at their lifestyle and how they're living their life as a way to increase the diversity and quality of their microbiome.
Absolutely. Yeah, we ended up getting a food box. I was happy to have it delivered on the last year or so because I live in a smaller town. And so it's an organic food box. And I just basically, you can customize it or you can just have them deliver what they have. And I said, okay, just deliver what you have. And I've just been getting this awesome variety because, you get stuck in this, I'm going to have my apple, my orange, my banana, like all these same
yes
all the time. And I'm like, just bring what the box has. Sometimes I'm like, I don't know what that is. And then I look it up and we cook with it. So it's been kind of a cool process to do.
I love that. And like you were saying too, like you get used to certain foods that you like, but also even the way that we eat certain foods, like for example, you just said, your certain apple. But another example of feeding the microbes is you can take an apple and you can kind of boil it with a little bit of water. It's sort of an old-fashioned recipe, but you just you heat it basically with the skin on. And then when the skin gets really shiny, that's releasing the pectin. And the pectin is actually what feeds the microbes. So you're making almost like a homemade applesauce. And it's one of the most powerful ways for healing the gut, but also feeding the microbes. So sometimes, like you said, we think of, let's eat an apple. It's got fiber, it's got the skin, and it's really a great food. But then also the way we prepare foods and changing that up can be really important too, thinking about getting food in different ways. So the winter, when it's colder, we can think about warming our apples, right, with that skin on and getting that extra pectin. Yeah.
And do you put a little bit of water with that or you just?
Yeah, exactly. So if you you cut up maybe 3 or 4 apples with the skin on, cored them, and then you put about a half a cup of water at the bottom, and then you just heat it up until you saw that skin gets nice and shiny. And then you can pulse it if you want, or kind of mash it with a potato masher. You could add some cinnamon or clove and make like a homemade, and you can jar it and have some left over. Yeah.
That sounds good. I love it.
Yeah, doesn't it sound good? Yeah. It's so great. It's amazing for the gut. So even things like that, just playing around with different textures and the types of foods and how we consume them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So as far as stress and the impact on disease, because we can eat this like beautiful, and we see people eating this beautiful, healthy diet, and then they have all this other stress, even, in this case, people dealing with infertility, which impacts every aspect of their life, and then not really having an outlet or even someone to talk to, or the whole stress of this. How does that impact our ability to conceive?
Yeah, I would say it's probably the biggest factor for all issues, really, because I think we don't often think of what stress is. There's like 4 different types of stress. There's the chemical stress, which you've probably had people talk about personal care products or mold exposures, and environmental toxins is one, like what we talked about on the chemicals in our food. And then, of course, the digestive stress that we already talked about, but also undiagnosed food intolerances, antibiotic exposure on the digestive health, and glyphosate. And then there's the physical stress, which is too much exercise or too little exercise, viral and bacterial infections. Those are very significant and active forms of stress for a lot of people. And then the 4th biggest one is emotional, which is, past trauma, abuse, guilt, and that stress is huge. And a lot of the research really points to that emotional stress is a core element in all the physiology of the body, that the body is really driving a lot of its biology from how we cope with that. And if we don't have self-forgiveness and self-love, then we're shifting the cells and DNA in our body. And I talk a little bit about this in my next book, which comes out in 2020 with Hay House.
Awesome.
Yeah, which part of what I was looking at there was, even in my own clinical practice, I would, like you said, see people that had a great diet. Their diet was perfect. They had good lifestyle behaviors. Maybe we addressed digestive issues, and everything on paper looked good, but they had never really unpacked a lot of the emotional issues that sort of perpetuated and was this ongoing burden. And that continued to resurface as the main element in prohibiting them from really reaching their goals. They got well and they got better, but they really couldn't overcome until they got to that place where they were willing to address whatever it was that was sort of creeping up. And there's been a lot of research on that emotional component and the body's ability to heal. And it's not just an emotional event or a traumatic event. It can be just the memory of a traumatic event. And the research looking at what's actually happening in the body as a result of people thinking about an event that took place already and the effect that it's having on the heart and all of the vital organs was really shocking, to be honest with you. So
to keep reliving it over and over again.
Yeah, so the body doesn't need the event to take place. It only needs the memory in order to have the detrimental effects on the cells. Yeah, literally where they've looked at cardiac patients, and just a memory of a previous heart attack changed the function of the heart, dropping it by, like 17%, and even some cases 40%. So dramatic impact on the actual current function of the body's organs just by reflecting back to even unrelated things. So things like emotional events or traumas or things that they had experienced that they had memories of. So I think the message there is I'm not a big fan of emotionally unpacking through intensive therapies that force people to relive it. Now, some people may need that, or that may be beneficial. I actually did not enjoy that experience. I've had previous traumas myself, and I found that was an unpleasant experience to continually go back and try to unpack those events. Mm-hmm. So I ended up breaking up with my therapist. I said to her, this is just too depressing. I don't enjoy coming. I don't enjoy how I feel when I leave. Mm-hmm. So everyone has to be very clear with themselves on how they're feeling, I think, based on what vehicle they choose, to move through that. So I can get myself to a very healing place with my mind, definitely with meditation. Yoga was very powerful for me. I cried, I think, for the first 5 years on the mat, but that's okay. I don't do that anymore. So that's a good thing. But I think for me, the movement was very powerful. I find meditation and movement is much more powerful for me in terms of letting go. And so I don't really carry a lot of suffering from my past experiences. I can think about them and let them go. So I think it's really important for people to have transitions and really honor different stages in their life, that when they have difficult times, to recognize that that time is over and that you're a different person and that you're capable of so much more, and then allow yourself to have that transition. So I talk a little bit about that in the book too, as a behavior that we can really practice. So we have different transitions and rituals in our life, big events, usually happy events. In this case, if somebody would become pregnant, it would be, a major life event and a transition. But we don't really honor some of the transition for difficult times, or times that we've overcome in the past, or things that we've been through. And I think it's okay for us to acknowledge them, and to acknowledge that we're different and we're stronger and we have a new set of skills, and then to celebrate that we're at a different place, a crossroad, and move on. So really kind of putting a stake in the ground and then making that conscious choice towards a life we want.
And would that be through what sort of modality, like through journaling, or what's worked for you or your clients, kind of with the ritual?
Yeah. And I think that's the key, I think, is to find what works for you. So for me, it was yoga and movement. For other people, it might be therapy. For other people, it can be meditation. It can be tapping. It can be, there's so many different practices we have today. And I think that what's often happened is we're not exploring or experimenting with what could help. We're just sort of kind of suppressing, ignoring, or waiting for it to go away. And journaling can be very powerful too. So you're right. I think the idea is to say, boy, I'm not recognizing that I feel this trauma or this guilt or this upset or this difficulty, or that I've been through a lot. And so how do I move on from that? And sometimes it isn't necessarily something you have to do long term. I'll give you an example. When we were filming the documentary, I had been sick for a very long time, and it was a very complicated thing to do a documentary film that you are sharing your story, you're sharing the details of your story, so you have to relive a lot of those details. And during the filming process, I was crying a lot.
Yeah.
Right. And not just on screen, because I do that a lot too, but off screen, while we were trying to move through some of the actual footage. And at one point, one of the producers stopped the filming, and she told the cameraman to stop filming. And she pulled me aside, and she just put her hands on me, and she looked at me and she said, "It's over. You did it." And she just, in that moment, she said, "You don't have to fight anymore." Nobody had ever acknowledged that I was not the victim anymore. So even in that instance, somebody else was making that transition for me. You see what I mean? It was so powerful, because nobody had ever said that my fight with, I was still a little bit in it. I was still afraid that I would get sick again. I had a little bit of post-traumatic stress that I might relapse. What if we don't stay well? What if this isn't, And of course, that wasn't true, but nobody had really just looked at me and said, "It's over, you did it." And it was life-changing. So sometimes I think it's also just not necessarily a lot of action that we do or a therapy, but it's just to pause and take a moment and say that I'm different and I'm not afraid, or I'm brave now. Or I'm capable, I'm enough, So that was a very powerful thing that I had not anticipated. And it was a single moment transition, I would say.
Yeah, a lot of times you don't see these things coming, where you think you've got it all together, and then something hits you, and then someone will say something and you're like, oh.
Yes.
Okay.
That's right.
Yeah, I don't have to be this rock, this superwoman, this, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I think that helps, sometimes maybe it's a friend or a stranger or somebody you don't even expect will say something, or an experience that you might have, or maybe you just ask the universe for a sign, or maybe you just are reading different books that help fill you up, or, I think it doesn't have to look like anything in particular. I just think it's acknowledging that we have these emotional components to the healing journey. They're unique to us, and we just have to acknowledge them and then let them take place, and then be willing to let go and just have that healing response and move on. It's a very powerful, and there's lots of them. It's never just one moment, right? It's okay to have lots of little moments. I think that's the other thing. That wasn't the only time, but it was like, that was a really big shift for me because somebody else saw it in me. I'm sure my husband felt it and probably just never thought to say it. Right? It's not that he's a mean person or didn't think that I had accomplished something extraordinary, right? But somebody else on the outside could see it, based on the way I was behaving. So, yeah.
And this kind of plays into our next question about mindset, and then in this case, helping prepare our body for pregnancy and long-term health.
I love that. Yeah, it's kind of exactly along those same lines. I talk a little bit about congruence in the book. The book is really, it's sort of ending the chronic disease pattern and building a more resilient body, but it's also talking about what the book is about, harnessing the power of our beliefs, behaviors, and bacteria. So all of my 3 favorite topics, but also just kind of shifting that mindset to set the stage for whatever experience an individual is seeking. So I always say the body can't go where the mind won't let it. So if the body is kind of, you're wanting or expecting something to happen physically and you want a healing process to take place, or you want to have a baby, then you need to put yourself in that mindset of that this is possible. And sometimes it can be very simple things like creating a space at home that sets that intention into motion, like maybe creating a sacred meal between you and your spouse, like a family meal. So we have dinner as our sacred meal, where we always come together at dinner time every day, 7 days a week. That's our sacred time as a family. The conversation doesn't feel that sacred. It's usually bickering, but but it's still something. It's kind of it's our space. It's our time. It's a time for us to come together. It's a consistency, and it's a family time, and it is what we would say a ritual. And you can start to create that ritual even before a baby is born, of a family time or a sacred space or some type of a ritual that you would want to incorporate if the baby was already there. And so that's sort of setting that tone and putting the mind in that space of welcoming. Another example of this is like in Okinawan homes, they create an ancestral shrine that is visible in the main room of the house, which is a reminder that we're not just islands. We're always connected to something bigger. So that ancestral lineage is there. So maybe it's, creating something like that in your own home, where your extended family, other people that are close to you, you might create sort of a collage at home. And that's really a message of building on your family, or an extension of your family, that it's not just you, you're not isolated, that you have all of these other supports and elements, and that you're going to be adding to that, right? So it's kind of it is a mindset and a shift that you are putting yourself in the space of expansion, and that you're ideally changing your diet and your lifestyle because you're working towards health. Not that you're trying to fix infertility, or not that you're trying to undo anything, but that you're trying to work towards what a healthy life and a healthy body wants, and a vision for what you want. And so in doing that, your attention shifts towards your desires as opposed to the negative of what's not working.
Yeah, I love that. I find the ritual thing just keeps coming up over and over again. I just interviewed Dr. Marisa Snyder, her new book.
Nice.
And she was talking all about rituals in there. And then I love that piece about the collage with the ancestors. I was at a workshop, and they had us start by saying, and thank you, we would name our grandmother and our mother and ourself. That we're part of this lineage. I'm like, oh my goodness. And invite them in, that we are not standing by ourselves. There's like this lineage of like strong, powerful women, or just women around us. This was a women's retreat, but you can have the whole, both sides. But yeah, sometimes we feel like it's just us and we're by ourselves. And
exactly. Yeah, I love that. So I think those are, 2 examples, but I think people can think of lots of ways that they themselves can think about, how do I put myself in the mindset of what my desires are, what we want, what our family wants, congruence is really creating the values. What are your values, and do your daily actions really speak to what's important to you? And does every member of the family live to those values? So it's not one person doing something. So when you have a spouse, if you're changing your diet because you want to have a healthy baby, then ideally they should be as well, because that's really living in congruence. There's not internal conflict. So the importance of that, and the importance of doing it collectively, because you're sort of both working towards the same goal, and fertility is a team sport.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And then also, you don't want to take unhealthy microbes back from your partner if they're not really taking care of their health. So you could be doing all the right things, and then you could be swapping back unhealthy microbes. So that congruence and setting that intention together is, let's just do this together, and let's really be devoted to the life we want, building that future together. Because you don't only want to get pregnant, but you also want to have a healthy pregnancy, a healthy delivery, and a healthy baby. And the immune system of the baby is determined in the first 4 years of life, so 0 to 4. So it isn't something that you're doing just to get pregnant. It's because this is the life that you want, really.
Mm-hmm. And in the beginning, we were just coaching women with female factor infertility. And then I'm like, wait, there's a whole other component. So then we started coaching couples, and then we were just doing the protocols mainly for the woman. And then we're like, the man's over here saying, my sperm is fine. Then every time we dug further in the blood chem and looked at, the health history, we'd be like, oh, and then there'd be things that we would find. And so now it's changed to looking, doing full protocols for both, even though where he's like, I'm fine. Because typically, as we say, it takes two to tango in this, and to set up for a healthy pregnancy, and baby.
100%. Yes, absolutely.
And as far as any books or websites or apps, anything that you're obsessed with right now that you're loving, that you wanted to share with us?
Gosh, so many things. I think for your audience, I tend to kind of stay on, I like the broader lens. I always think every woman needs Dr. Christiane Northrup's book,
Yes.
Woman's Bodies, Woman's Wisdom. Mm-hmm. That's definitely one of my favorites, because to me, it's more of an encyclopedia of, women's health. So I think that women should build a wellness library that is not niched into, specific categories of health, but kind of really looks through that lens of the whole body, the wisdom of the whole body. But another book that I've actually pointed some of my own clients to, not specific to fertility, but specific to hormone imbalance, because I think she did an incredible job, is Cooking for Hormone Balance by Magdalena Wisłocka. And it's very good, because what she's talking about is using food specifically for high estrogen, low progesterone, really balancing the hormones using food. So seed cycling, all whole, easy recipes, but whole food based. So she gives you all the recipes and the ways to do, but also includes the educational piece. So not just the cooking and the recipes, but also why you're doing it, and then how to choose, the plan based on what your hormone imbalance is. So I love that. A lot of really great information in there. She talks about gut health, talks about all the stressors, a lot of the things that we talked about today. I'm sure she included there, because she did a nice job. So those would be my two favorites for, kind of that broad lens. And then otherwise, I tend to get deep into the research. I like to dig into the details at a cellular level. So people probably wouldn't be excited about what I read. Yeah.
Is there anything you wanted to share there?
I think I'm more interested in the compounds of food. So, and what their role is in terms of changing who we are and what we do. So, for example, there was research that came out that talked about the exosomes, which is certain elements on food, proteins on food that, like plant-based foods. In this case, the study looked at ginger, grapes, citrus, and I forget what the other one was. But essentially, when we take those foods in, those just happen to be the four they studied, but there are other plant-based foods, that they were turning off immunological markers for Crohn's, colitis, inflammation, and other pathways. And so it was really exciting to me to see that, in nature, Mother Nature has provided a lot of data, or I would say data on the food, that is turning on and off our genetic predisposition for certain disease pathology. So I know there's a big push to understand our genome or to look at all these environmental factors, but I just want to encourage people to be more excited about the capacity for food to heal. And I think it's just that we don't fully understand how extraordinary it is. And so we sort of think of it as, well, I could change my diet, but, I think people don't think it's as much of a healing modality as it really is. And I would just argue that it is the most sophisticated thing that we can do in terms of giving our body information. So I think of food as information, that it's coming into the body, and the body is a very cellular matrix, a connection, an entire interconnected system. And the food is coming in and providing information in a bioavailable way. So if we can really just think about the quality and the beauty of the food that we're eating and sit down and enjoy it and then recognize it for what it's doing, then I think it's going to help more people than they realize. So that it was so powerful for us. And I think that it's because I just had such a deep appreciation for what was actually happening that I never questioned it. I never questioned it as not being enough. So I would just encourage people to eat with great curiosity and to just know that the food is extraordinarily powerful as a healing mechanism.
Yeah, I love that, because I think sometimes people are like, "Ooh, is it really?" They don't really believe it, or they're not sure. And
Yeah.
and for you, just went in there with an open mind and went, "Okay," and then saw the amazing benefits that it helped for yourself and your family.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Exactly.
Now, is there any success story you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I have so many different, they're all a little bit unique. I know if people see the film, Secret Ingredients, there's one in there that was the story of she was the mom who had all kinds of testing, had multiple miscarriages. She had 3 different miscarriages, and had testing done and was told nothing was wrong. Her and her husband both had testing, and she eventually came to me, out of frustration. And then we made some dietary changes, and she got pregnant and had a healthy baby girl. Mm. And in her instance, she was reacting to dairy and soy. Mm. So it were very simple sensitivities that she was having. So genetically modified soy and dairy can be hugely problematic for people. And that was a major issue for her. Now, that was not something that was going to show up on a test. It certainly wasn't going to show up as something that was impacting her fertility, but it was. And so much so that she was having that experience. And then I have another mom who was told she would never get pregnant, and that if she ever got pregnant, she would need to be on thyroid medication because she had Hashimoto's for the rest of her life, and how dangerous it would be. And she was very convinced that she wanted to try something natural. She wanted to improve her diet. She really wanted to make a conscious effort to really be healthier herself first. So that was a good thing, because she was the one that was really motivated. Mm-hmm. And she was very successful. She was very successful in having, she now has 3 babies.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And when she got pregnant the first time, after doing that, she went back to her endocrinologist and said, "I'm pregnant." And he rolled his eyes at her. So all of her hormones were normal and her lab tests were normal. So she did not need hormone medication or thyroid medication, but he did not believe that diet could play a role for her. But that's okay, because she walked away from that saying, she had what she wanted, which was a successful outcome, and ended up having a healthy baby and healthy pregnancy. And she's now in the health field helping other families. So there are countless stories like that of people who feel strongly that, shifting their diet is an important component. And I would also just say that no matter what choices people make, whether they do fertility treatments or whatever road they decide to go down, a healthy body is still the ultimate. I mean, that you always want to move forward with any pregnancy, no matter what, with a healthy body and a strong, resilient body, so you can fight infections, so you can have a healthy delivery, so you can have a great postpartum experience, so you can have great breastfeeding, and so you can have that longevity. So it isn't always that it's one or the other. It's whatever I choose, I want it to be the best experience it can be. So it's never that, oh, changing my diet was not beneficial or didn't result in a natural pregnancy. It's maybe I was unsuccessful with accomplishing a natural pregnancy by changing my diet and lifestyle. But boy, am I so much stronger now. I'm such a different person. I feel really proud of myself for everything that I've done and all the changes that I've made. And now I'm going to have a successful baby and a successful experience and so forth. So I think that's the message, really, is to just be the best version of yourself, no matter what you choose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, focusing on yourself is never the mistake or the wrong choice.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so you have a free gift for our listeners, and it's an e-guide to resilient foods. And can you share what they'll get with that?
Oh, yeah. So I put together like a small e-guide of 10 foods that speak to some of the things that we've talked about, which is really just to try to inspire people to think about foods for their resiliency effect, for their capacity to nourish the body in that way, thinking about those healing compounds, why they're effective for the body. So I kind of picked my top 10 and put the different reasons why they would be important and the benefits of including them in the diet. So it's a free guide, a colorful book handout, and people can just download that and then just infuse those into their diet naturally.
All that in the show notes, and they can find that at Kathleen DiChiara. So Kathleen, DiChiara.com/e-guide -2-resilient-foods.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show, Kathleen.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it was great chatting again, sharing your words of wisdom, and I love all the stuff that you're always researching, and excited about your new book. And definitely check out Secret Ingredients. It's just an amazing movie that Kathleen is just so open and vulnerable during that experience, and now sharing kind of what was going on in the back end of that. So powerful. So thank you so much.
Great. And I'll be teaching some online courses, in May, probably May or June. So teaching probably my master course for digestive health too. So if people are struggling in that area and they want to kind of up-level their digestive function or microbiome health, then they can kind of stay tuned for that. So hasn't been announced yet, but it'll be sometime in May.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks again.
All right. You're welcome.
Hey there, Sarah Clark here. So are you struggling to have your baby? First of all, please know that my heart goes out to you. I support couples worldwide who are struggling with infertility to conceive and have healthy babies. Women like Rita, who gave birth to her beautiful daughter after following my fertility coaching system. Or Danielle, who after 2 failed IUIs was able to get pregnant after a supercharger fertility discovery call with me. So here's how you get my help for free. So I offer a free supercharger fertility discovery call. And on that call, I'll create a plan with you that is going to help you fast track your success. So this call is not for everyone. And I'm really picky about who I get to speak with. And I have a strict but totally reasonable criteria that needs to be met in order for us to move forward. So here's who I can help. So first of all, you need to be able to explore your infertility diagnosis in a new light. So this offers for people who are open-minded, they're coachable, and if you can do that and want to double or triple your chances at the fertility clinic or get pregnant, awesome. So let's get on the phone and chat. Also, you must be an action taker. So someone who's committed to seeing results, you're able to follow directions. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to do anything bizarre. But if you're one of those people who like to consume a ton of information, but don't like to spend time implementing and seeing results, then the call's not really for you. So I only want to spend time with people who are genuinely committed to their own success. So just click on the link in the show notes and apply, or go to fabfertile.com and click on the free consult. So it's a really short application that just tells me about your health, how long you've been trying to conceive, and how soon you'd like to be pregnant. So seriously, this is going to be the best time you've ever spent on your fertility. Looking forward to chatting. Talk soon. Thank you for listening to Get Pregnant Naturally. Seriously, it means the world to me that you're here. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you can be notified of upcoming episodes. I'm excited to offer you a special gift. If you're a U.S. resident, text FERTILE to 345-345. You'll be prompted to enter your email address and you'll receive our fertility yoga download. In this 20-minute intro video, we focus on a calming and peaceful practice to connect back to your heart. These simple fertility yoga poses can help quiet negative thoughts and make you feel more in control. Download it now and get started today. So for US residents, text FERTILE, FERTILE, to 345-345. For non-US residents, go to www.yogafreebie.com to access your special gift. That's www.yogafreebie.com to access the free fertility yoga download. And I love this quote by Dr. Mark Hyman, Medical Director of the Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine and Chairman of the Institute for Functional Medicine. Functional medicine is medicine by cause, not by symptom. Functional medicine practitioners don't in fact treat disease. We treat your body's ecosystem. We get rid of the bad stuff, put in the good stuff, and because your body is an intelligent system, it does the rest. Thanks for listening. Until next time.